Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. It's been a few weeks again for us here, but you're with Steve Wyss and Jonathan Fadugba. Lots of action's been going on domestically in Europe and stuff like that. It's exciting times. Jonathan, how are you doing?
Hi, Steve, and hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. Hope you're doing well. Very exciting times in our leagues at the moment. Some international media has been following this Swedish league, at least, in the last few weeks. I've seen the New York Times, I've seen The Guardian, I've seen everyone covering a certain team at the top, who we will talk about. And, of course, Steve, the very top table of the game is even featuring Norwegian football these days, with Bodø Glimt in the Champions League officially. So there's plenty to talk about, and of course, always good to be with you, my friend. How's things with yourself?
Yeah, things are going quite well. This is always a very exciting time of the season, isn't it? Lots going on. It's a shame there's another international break coming up soon again. That'll change next year. They're actually scrapping one of the breaks, aren't they? So for once, FIFA, UEFA, whatever, doing the right thing. But exciting times. And, first round of the Champions League, I like how they're doing it these days. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where there's no other competitions on. Nice little breakdown in splits. And it feels like every match really matters for every team now. And, great match to start with for Bodø Glimt, 2-2 draw at Slavia Prague. It was one of the best matches of the whole first match day, really.
So you're a fan of this format, are you?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I feel like the people I talk to, I would say 75% of people like it and 25% don't.
You mean the league format, or do you mean the scheduling of like the first week, like the Tuesday?
I mean, I like the first week. I don't think anyone could argue with that, can they? Surely, I think that the Champions League deserves that attention to itself. The actual league format that does divide. It doesn't divide opinion. I think more people are in favour of it, but I think those who don't like it really hate it. If you know where I'm coming from, a bit Marmite sort of thing. I don't know what. I've never really asked you what camp you're in for the new Champions League format. You're going to have to reveal here.
I think I'm a bit undecided, to be honest. I do have some concerns about the long-term game in terms of how much the money is maybe going to distort certain leagues. I think it's becoming a European Super League, obviously with the 6 English teams now. I mean, that might be a perpetual thing in the future, mightn't it? There might continually be nine English teams in European competition, which, if you look at the transfer window, this what's just happened past summer with all the super squads getting built at places like Liverpool, Arsenal. Is that a bit of a maybe potential worry about the future of the game? Chelsea as well, but in itself, I'm not too against it. Teams playing. I'm not against the sort of 8 games where you play different opposition, for example. Maybe the home and away format, 6 games, was getting a bit jaded, a bit predictable. So yeah, I'm open to change. To be fair, Steve, I'm a bit on the fence, to be honest. I'm still feeling it out. If I'm being honest, I haven't quite decided what.
I think that sounds positive to me. Actually, I can sense that I'm starting to maybe get impact you here, and I think
can see both sides. I can see both sides. Let's put it that way, and I'm open-minded. But one thing I will definitely say, Steve, is if anything that's got Bodø Glimt in it is going to be watched by me. So, let's start there with, obviously on the last podcast, they were pretty much through after they absolutely destroyed Sturm Graz. And then they did officially cover it. And then we didn't have a pod that week, I don't think. So we'll talk about how they got in their first ever game in the Champions League, Steve. But, I know you said you liked the format. Was it given a bit of extra spice by this Norwegian qualification? How have you felt about that? And did that give you a bit of extra spring in your step in the week, past week?
Yeah, look, their win against Sturm Graz in qualifying was one of the best results of this era. They've been building up towards it. I've been waiting. How long was it? 18 years for a Norwegian team to be in the Champions League main phase. I felt like we've been waiting for a long time for it as a podcast. So, I'm going to enjoy it whilst it's here. It's not easy for these teams to qualify for the top table now. I was excited for them. I was excited to watch the game. Slavia Prague, I mean, on paper, some might say it's one of the easier matches. But Slavia Prague actually kicked off odds-on favourites to win the game. So, but they're not a bad team at all. The champions of the Czech Republic.
Well, before you get into the game, we will talk about it in a second. But for those who don't know, because we didn't really talk about it, so let's just recap it now. Let's look at who Glimt have got in the Champions League, because obviously the draw was made I think about a fortnight ago. Obviously, games have gone on since then, and the campaign's up and running now. But I just thought I'll read out, Steve. You already, as a man yourself, you'll know all about these games. I know you'll be well prepared for them. But obviously, Slavia Prague away, which got played last week, 2-2 draw. Glimt then have Spurs at home, of course, who they'll be familiar with from the Europa League. They then have Galatasaray away. Obviously, this is the new 8-game format where you play different teams home and away, and it's done on coefficient, isn't it, the draw? So they've then got Galatasaray away. You don't play teams twice. Galatasaray away. Then they've got Monaco at home in November. Then they've got Juventus at home again in November. And Dortmund away, Steve. Manchester City at home, January 2026. And they'll wrap it all up with Atletico Madrid away. So 2 huge games, well, 3 huge games really to end it, won't they? But firstly, before we get into that Slavia Prague, I just wanted to know what was your overall thoughts about the draw? What did you think about it? How pleased were you to see them qualify? And what did you make of the draw in terms of even could they potentially, where could they look at in the group phase of things? I know it's a massive league table, and if they can make it into potentially the playoffs, or can they qualify automatically? Just give us your initial thoughts on all that.
Well, I think it's one of those where I actually had a look at there was a chart given out. There's loads of these sources where it ranked each team's difficulty of fixtures in the Champions League. Now, that's obviously based on coefficient, home and away, all sorts of stuff. And Glimt actually did rank as one of the easier set of fixtures, to be honest with you. But one thing I will say about the matches, they scream loads of goals to me. I mean, already have had a 2-2 draw. Galatasaray away. Galatasaray only played one way in Europe. Monaco, Juventus are full of goals this year. Dortmund. I mean, these matches are going to be a lot of overs. Then they've got Man City at home in the Arctic Circle on the 20th of January. I mean, that's an intriguing one for me. Haaland comes home in midwinter. I mean, that part of Norway that time of year is horrendous. I mean, in Game of Thrones terms, it's further north than the wall, mate. It's absurd how. So that's an interesting one. I think Spurs at home is a really difficult game. We know they struggled against. We know that Glimt have struggled against Premier League opposition in general. Arsenal did a really good job on them 2 years ago as well. So I'm not expecting them to get anything against Tottenham again. And then the last game at Atletico Madrid is very, very difficult. But there's chances of them to get points. I think they can definitely beat one of these big boys. I'm looking at the likes of Dortmund, Juventus, Monaco. I think Glimt can win one of those 3. Don't know whether you think they're capable there, but I could see them. I mean, Monaco were horrendous first week. That is a very winnable game because they can be bloody awful on a bad day. So whether they can qualify, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, does it? They're enjoying themselves. But if they could sneak into the top 24, it'd be a hell of an achievement considering the opposition they've got.
Some great perspective there, Stephen. I know you were all over the coefficient when the draw was made on X, on Twitter, on your Twitter account. You were sort of commentating on the potential games they could face. As you've mentioned there, sort of a 24 teams will at least make the knockout phase, and then it's seeded, isn't it, and unseeded. Top 8 go through automatically to the last 16, and that's the format that, I'm sure this year there'll be a few tweaks. I remember Liverpool were complaining, weren't they, when they finished top and then had a sort of tough game against PSG that they moaned about. But do you think, if we look at some of the teams that qualified last year, Brest, for example, made it to the knockout phase. Of course, they were unfortunate to get PSG, weren't they, who went on to win the thing. But, they had a really good run, won 4 of 8 games, which is really impressive when you think of a team like Brest in France, Stade Brestois. We had teams like Club Brugge sneaked into it. Man City had a really bad season, didn't they? And in it finished 22nd, and obviously then had to play Real Madrid in the knockout. Celtic made it through. I'm just looking at Monaco, of course, got there. So there is the potential. Do you think Glimt can be amongst that sort of top 24? Or do you think, if you look further down the table, it was the likes of maybe the Swiss teams like Young Boys who got 0 points. Slovan Bratislava got 0 points. Girona obviously struggled on 3 points. Teams like Bologna, Dinamo Zagreb, Shakhtar Donetsk, they're the ones, Sparta Prague, of course, who really struggled and got knocked out automatically. Where do you think Glimt sit in that dynamic? And obviously, if we tie that into the question of the game they've just played, Steve, last week against Slavia Prague, 2-2 draw. You obviously watched that game, you followed it. Based on what you saw in that game, if you could just give an overview of the result, the scorers, and also from your point of view in that match, what did you see in terms of where you think they could finish based on that one game?
Well, we know away from home they've got a bad record in recent years. They score goals away from home. They don't win many matches away from home. In fact, they rarely avoid defeat, especially on a grass pitch. So, they fell behind early and Bodø scored. Slavia Prague had a really good first half, actually. I think they dominated the metrics and stuff. But, Glimt weren't without opportunities. But, they missed a huge opportunity just after half-time. Kasper Ho from the penalty spot. Really good chance, obviously, to equalise. Now, he'd been a doubt for the game. And, I didn't expect him to play, but he was given the start. It may have been a case of if he was fully fit, firing, might he have scored that penalty? We will never know, will we? But it looked like it was going to come back to haunt them because Slavia Prague got a second goal, 74th minute, 2-0. And it's game over, isn't it, really? You just don't expect Bodø Glimt to come back from 2-0 down against Slavia Prague. They're missing some players, Glimt, at the minute, which is a bit of a concern for them. Bjørkan, mentioned him before, the left back. He's a huge player for them. And the minute Eliteseiren is covering for him there, I think I actually tweeted from my own account how bad he was in the game. Felt a bit harsh, but he was out of his depth in that game, I felt. Scored an own goal as well at the weekend. It's a really tough position. So you just can't replace Bjørkan very easily. But then they came back. They got a goal from Bassi, former Tromsø player. And it got them into the game, and the equaliser is brilliant. You've probably seen the equaliser do the rounds on X and the socials. Sondre Fett with a beautiful volley into the roof of the net, unsavable. And that made it 2-2 in the 90th minute. There was about 8 or 9 minutes added time. The game wasn't done because Slavia laid absolute siege to their goal in injury time. And the keeper, Haikin, I've mentioned him before, big player, comes up with big saves, and he had an incredible save. It was effectively near the last kick of the game. Beautiful move by Slavia Prague. I can't remember who missed the chance, but it was a brilliant save, and he deflected it over behind for a corner. They cleared the corner, and that was the full-time whistle. So Haikin did his part there. It was a brilliant comeback, and if they can show that sort of fight, then they can get themselves some points, can't they, on the board in these group stages. Home form is going to be massive for them. We know how important home form is for them there at Mira Stadion. But so for them, it's a brilliant result. It's a brilliant comeback. Plenty of positives. The negative is, they do look like they're going to concede quite a few chances at this level. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, Sondre Fett with a bit of a beauty to equalise. Wasn't a bit of a scramble in the box, and then it came to him, and he's absolutely leathered that left footed off the crossbar, and it always looks better off the crossbar, doesn't it, Steve? Slavia Prague had a decent lad, and Bodø, he looked quite good, a bit of a poacher, wasn't he, in the 6-yard box in that match? Bassi also, of course, came on and reduced the deficit. Steve, I wanted to, what do you make of the makeup of the squad at the moment with Glimt? Because they've got a few exciting. I know you've been very praiseworthy for the goalkeeper, for example. Knutsen's got his dream of playing in this Champions League proper. They've also got a young lad that I want to ask you about. Now, I don't know if you want to, you let me know if you want to answer this now, or you want to answer this maybe in part 2 when we come to the Eliteseiren. But we do need to talk about this young kid, I think, that is sort of rising through the ranks, isn't it? Mikkel Bro Hansen, sorry, Steve, 16 years old. He obviously didn't play in this game, but he has started to sort of appear in recent games. He even got a goal. So I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on Glimt's makeup of the squad and how that's, how they're going to deal with it, who's going to be the key men if they are going to qualify from the Champions League, and also what's the skinny on this young 16-year-old, because a lot of people are talking about him in Norway at the moment.
Well, I want to give a shout out actually to both goalkeepers first and foremost. The expected goals.
You love your keepers.
The expected goals in the game was 6.5, 6.5, and there was only 4 goals scored. So that obviously says in itself that the keepers had the Slavia Prague keeper. I don't know if we've got any Czech listeners, But Stanek, I think is his name. I've never heard of him before. Jindrik Stanek, 29-year-old keeper. He really impressed me with his positioning. I can tell a good keeper straight away. I know early, very, very quickly how a keeper's very good. And his positioning is brilliant against shots. And his long distribution was really good as well. And Haikin, I've said before, underrated keeper. And back to Bro Hansen, 16-year-old, he's a wonder kid. In football manager terms, he'd be described as a wonder kid. This is a lad who, I think he scored 6 goals in 3 cup matches this season. So when he's been given the starts, he's taking his chances. I think he has now scored an Eliteseiren goal off the top of my head. It was a late
goal against Christiansen.
Yes. They brought him on when the game was won. But obviously they didn't call off the dogs, did they? Because he came on and scored. So look, he looks like he's a really brilliant talent, 16-year-old kid. And from what I've seen of him, he's just a good finisher. He knows where to put the ball in the back of the net. So I think there's a lot of exciting things to come from him. What do I think of the makeup of the squad? Yeah, it's pretty good at the minute. As I said before, I think Björkan, it's an irreplaceable position. Like left wing, he's a left back, but he's sort of inverted. He can do any role you want in that spot. And anyone that's come in to play there whenever he's not featured just can't do this anywhere near as same good a job as him. So that is a big blow. I think they can cope in all the other spots reasonably well. I think maybe goalkeeper would be a problem. And obviously Ho is a huge, huge player for them up front because of the type of striker he is. But the rest of the squad is pretty good right now, got to say.
Let's move on then, because Glimt, they've been waiting for so long for this, and obviously their league form hasn't really suffered too much, has it? They've been in pretty good form in the league as well. As I just mentioned there, that 7-1 win against Christiansen not too long ago with Bro Hansen, someone to keep an eye on 100%. This young kid, maybe someone who'll be in one of our rundowns in the future. But obviously, since the Prague Games League, they did also play Rosenborg, and they drew 1-1 in yesterday's game. But let's look at other teams. We have got a big week in Europe coming up, haven't we? And the Europa League, obviously, and Conference League kick off. And we've got some Norwegian interest, haven't we? So we're going to start now by previewing some of the other teams that are in Europe in our leagues. Starting off with Brann.
Yeah, I think it's quite a surprise that they have qualified for the Europa League. It does help that they started off in the Champions League qualifying, but they got a good beating by Salzburg, I think it was, in the Champions League qualifying. So then they dropped down to the next level. But I think they really did, surprise everyone. And now they've got, the reward is, I think they're the lowest ranked team on coefficient in the Europa League group stage, by quite a significant margin. But they kind of looked out with the draw a little bit. They dropped down to Europa qualification, and they faced Häcken over 2 legs. And that was actually close. I think it was only 1 goal in it. And then they get AEK Larnaca, who are not that bad, actually. The Cypriot teams are doing really well at the minute. So this is actually quite a good win. But they went to Larnaca and won 4-0 in the second leg. That was they just basically took their chances superbly. There was a red card in their favour, but they were so clinical. And, in terms of money differences, that's obviously going to make quite a big difference for them. In terms of the fixtures that they've got, there's some winnable games, I think. These are the fixtures they've got. They've got Lille away, Utrecht at home, Rangers at home, Bologna away, PAOK away, Fenerbahce at home, and Midtjylland at home, and then Sturm Graz away. There's no gimme on there, is there? And all the other teams are obviously going to fancy facing Brann. But I reckon there's a few points in there for them, don't you?
Tough to say, isn't it? Some of those games, potentially. What are you seeing in the league, though, that could, like I said, I know we're going to talk about them in part 2, about Eliteseiren in part 2, but what are you seeing in the league maybe that they can cling on to? Because obviously, if you look at the team rankings, Brann are kind of doing okay in some metrics, and in others, maybe you'd want a bit more. They're not having a bad season, all things considered, really, are they? Let's be fair. The third, according to our partners, Wyss Scouts huddle for expected goals in the league, behind Viking and Glimt. Expected goals against, they're a little bit, in fact, they're third as well. So, the metrics kind of favour them. Funnily enough, K from Oslo have the best expected goals against, according to Wyss Scout in the league, 22.03, whereas Brann have 24.77. What do these metrics and their form in domestic football tell you about maybe how they will approach Europe? Or will they maybe take one eye off Europe? Or will it be the full focus? We know with Glimt, it's going to be 100% full focus on Champions League because they've been waiting for so long. With Brann, is it slightly different? Different competition, different priorities? What's the sort of look from that point of view?
Well, so we'll talk about Eliteseiren later, but I mean, Brann are actually a title contender still. They're only 6 points behind Glimt and Viking, and they've got a game in hand. But there's no way they can keep up that title push unless they fully focus on domestic games and just put the reserves out for Europe. They're not. Brann have never ever had this. They've got 8 games in the Europa League to mix in with domestic matches. They are going to be shattered. They're playing Thursday nights as well. It's Champions League for Brann, for Glimt. At least they're Tuesdays, Wednesdays now. So that Thursday night away trip, followed by a Sunday match, or maybe a Monday in Norway, that will take it out of them. So I think it's going to be difficult. They're going to. But you're right about the metrics. They are effectively the third best team in Norway right now. I think everyone would agree that Bodø Glimt are the best team, and certainly from a domestic front, Viking are the second best team. One of those two probably will win the title. Brann aren't out of it, but that's what they are, and they're not to be underestimated. They showed that maybe in the Larnaca game. They've done better than I thought they would this season. I was a bit worried about them this season because they lost the manager. They've done quite well, and they've got a lot of positive. They've got goals in them, Brann. They've got a threat. The big weakness, I think, you can get at them defensively. So again, I think a bit like the Glimt fixtures, we're going to see quite a lot of goals. I think in Brann games. Some of these teams are known for goal. I mean, Bologna probably not, but the likes of Fenerbahce, Rangers are absolutely. I mean, Rangers right now, they want to keep. They've got to hope that Russell Martin stays in the job because Rangers look very, very beatable at the moment. Knowing their luck, there'll be a new manager by the 23rd of October, won't they? But that looks. Utrecht at home. I mean, we know what the Dutch sides are like. Lille away, I mean, that'll be a bonkers game as well. Lille will beat them, but there could be quite a few goals in it. So I'll tell you one thing, the Norwegian teams are well worth watching in Europe this season.
Yeah, and in part 2, we'll look at a little bit about some of the transfers as well. So we'll talk more about that. We're going to sort of recap some of the key transfers in Allsvenskan, maybe also Eliteseiren. I agree with you, Steph. I mean, I do think Brann have some winnable games, to be fair. You've just mentioned Rangers there. I've spoken to you about Russell Martin, haven't we, off pod. It's off topic for this podcast, but you never know. You'll
be desperate if Russell Martin still be in a job by that before that game. We can preview it and everything. You can break it down, and you'll have a field day.
I'll be honest. I don't think he'll be in a job by then, but who knows? Maybe there's an appetite one day. Me and Steve might branch out into a new podcast direction where we can talk about that kind of thing. But no, obviously he's really struggled, hasn't it? And there's comparisons with Ruben Amorim and just that kind of ideological manager style, which we've talked about, Stephen, off camera, but it's not for today. But just looking at Brann, they do have some. I think they have got some winnable games. If you look at what they did against Häcken, Larnaca, they've played some difficult teams in qualifying, haven't they? That will have prepared them. Again, just before we move on, Steve, do you think they'll go through? What's your prediction for them to, in terms of the European? What can they expect? What's your final prediction for them as of now?
No, I don't think they get the top 24, but I think they can get a few points on the board. And even if they don't, at least be competitive and have some fun out there. But I think to get in the top 24, it's just asking too much. That defence will let them down.
Fair enough. And yeah, like you said, we will be covering these games. There's a lot of extra fixtures, isn't it, for Brann? the season for these teams, the season's going to be done and dusted. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate the last few matches in sort of December and January. Of course, that's going to be a new dynamic for a lot of these teams, isn't it, as well, Steve? Which I guess we'll talk about in weeks to come. I think Bologna away is going to be a hard game, isn't it? And Lille especially probably might be their toughest test, in fact, this week coming. So if we just look at some of the other games, Steve, in the Europa League, obviously Aston Villa have got Bologna, teams that they'll come up against maybe in the latter stages as they get through. You've got Stuttgart, teams like Porto, Salzburg, who of course I think they played in qualifying. They played one of the Red Bull teams, didn't they, in qualifying already? Not sure who it was exactly. Again, might have got that wrong, but yeah, let's look at other teams that are in Europe, Steve. And when it comes down to it, the other teams are Swedish. So you're thinking that Brand probably might not qualify. If we look at the other teams, we've got Conference League, haven't we?
No, Malmo are in Europa League. Malmo Europa, Häcken are in Conference. So,
yes, I've got Häcken and Malmo written here, so I've prioritised Häcken. But let's swap that. Well, actually, no, we won't swap it because we got
start conference.
We're going to lead on to the Allsvenskan after talking about Malmo. So let's do a bit of a detour and start with Häcken, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean Häcken. I mean this is a surprise in itself for them to qualify. I mean to qualify for the Conference League. For some teams, it's brutal because they, unlike some other sides who started in the Champions League, they had to start life in the Europa League qualification. They lost to Brann, so after that you've got no wriggle room whatsoever, have you? But they sensationally beat Cluj 7-2 at home in qualifying. This was one of the results of the qualifying, actually. And that's in. I mean, they lost the second leg 1-0, but that's got them into the Conference League, and fair play to them for that. And they've got. I mean, their reward is actually 2 home matches against big teams: Rayo Vallecano, the Spanish representatives, and Racing Club de Strasbourg, or AKA Chelsea B. So they've got 2 big games there. The home matches, I do believe, will be played at Gamla Ullevi, not their own stadium, that's a bit of a blow for them. But nevertheless, their other home matches against AEK Larnaca, by the way, and they go to Slovan Bratislava, Zrinjski, and the opening game. I mean, this looks winnable to me. Shelbourne away, Irish opposition. I mean, I think both will fancy the win, won't they? There. But another European adventure for Häcken. They did get into the Europa League, didn't they, a few years ago? They were in Malmo's group? Or were they someone? Maybe, no, Mulder's group. It was in Mulder's group, weren't they? So, it's good for the club that they're in. I mean, domestically, they're struggling, but a European adventure now.
Yeah, now, long-time listeners. Now, you'd have to be listening to us for 7 years or more to remember this. But if anyone does remember this, we had an episode very early on, Steve, where it was a Norwegian team against the Northern Irish opposition. And the episode title, which I've never forgotten to this day, was Bedford Ballymena. Ballymena United, I think they played. And it was about sort of, I think fans were camping in, doing sort of sofa surfing in Ballymena. And that was the episode title, the hashtag Bedford Ballymena. I've never forgotten that to this day. But Shelbourne, so a trip to Dublin for Häcken fans. They're not doing too well in the league, but we'll come on to that in part 2. Sort of struggling. So this will be a really exciting adventure for the Hisingen brigade in Gothenburg. They will get to experience some really, like you said, exciting European ties. The league is obviously different format to the Champions League and Europa League. It's still a bit more traditional. There are some winnable games, like you said, Stephen. I think Häcken, they've been so unpredictable this season in some ways, and they've had so much a squad upheaval, which we'll talk about in part 2. It's almost hard to know who, really what you can expect from them in some ways. And some players could do well. Some players you think might not do as well as you'd like. But teams like Shelbourne, you'd expect them to potentially beat. So I think there are some prospects there. Obviously, the Europa League doesn't get underway the Conference League doesn't get underway until 2nd of October. So we are doing a bit of a round in the houses here. But when you look at that competition, Steve, you've probably got Crystal Palace, maybe as favourites. Fiorentina always seem to be in there somehow. Are they in it this time? Yeah, are they?
Yeah, they're always in it. Fiorentina and the Conference League are like going hand in hand. But yeah, they're 2 of the. I mean, Rayo Vallecano and Strasbourg, they are 2 of the favourites as well. So they get to face 2 of the better teams, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. I think you want to face at least one really big club, don't you? Surely. It's part of the experience. Fredrikstad are knocked out in qualifying, but they faced Palace. They faced a Premier League club and get a very good account of themselves for that matter. So I think, based on their domestic form, you wouldn't give them a chance of getting anywhere near qualification, would you? But they seem to raise their level in Europe a little bit in the last year or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I do actually think a welcome distraction might help Beko Häcken. They've had some decent results even in qualifiers to get to this point. I know they've had some disappointing results as well, like the Brand tie, where they were looking to get into the Europa League, but at the same time they did have some positive showings in some of the games, and they had some hard tests. But the quality of the opposition in the Conference League isn't as high as it is some of the teams they'll have faced in qualifying. So let's see how that goes for Beko Häcken. At this point, who even knows what will the situation will be by the 2nd of October, because there's a lot of pressure on the manager. Performances haven't been great. They're kind of almost getting sucked into relegation, but we'll look at that in part 2. Steve, before we wrap up the European previews, let's look at Malmo, and then from Malmo we're going to start with Malmo in Europe, and then we're going to go into Allsvenskan and talk about Malmo in the league, because there's a lot to unpack there. So that's why we've done Häcken first. So let's officially get into Malmo as our last European team, and then we'll get into domestic action. So maybe you take it away, Steve, with Malmo's group. That is in the Europa League, of course. That does start this week. They are starting off with a game against Ludogorets at home. But from your perspective, Steve, as a European man for all seasons, what's your perspective on Malmo in Europe? And just give us an overview of their clashes as well, who they're going to face.
It was a really an interesting qualifying for them. They started in qualifying for Champions League, looked really good against Iberia and RFS, Georgian and Latvian champions, and then was shocking, obviously, against Copenhagen twice. Thought 2 really, really poor performances against FC Copenhagen. And I mean, me and you weren't even sure if they were going to get back past Sigma Olomouc, were we, the Czech side? But they beat them 5-0 on aggregate to get into the Europa League. Part of me actually thinks they'd have been better off in the Conference League. If Malmo entered the Conference League, they're the sort of team I could definitely see them qualifying for the next round. And then, come January, February, they're the sort of team that can make reinforcements in the window and maybe do like what Djurgården did. But in Europa League, it's a lot more difficult. The matches they've got Ludogorets at home to start with, Victoria Plzeň away from home. That is a tough game for me. Dinamo Zagreb, Panathinaikos, Nottingham Forest away on the 27th of November. That's an interesting one for British fans, of course. They're at the City Ground. Porto away after that, that's very difficult. Red Star at home and Genk away in January, that's normally a really bad time, isn't it, for the Scandinavian teams? Anything after the winter break, they struggle with rhythm and dynamics. So I think it's a tough set of fixtures in general. And the way they're playing right now, they've got to improve. I mean, I know someone who's bet on Ludogorets already against Malmo on Wednesday. They think Ludogorets are a massive price against Malmo.
What is the price?
I don't actually know what the price is, but I know someone who
would they be heavily underdogs then?
Well, Ludogorets, they're 20 times champions of Bulgaria in a row, 15 times in a row. But Malmo will be the favourites for the first week. I think they're a little bit overrated right now. I think your take on Malmo was spot on about a month and a half ago. We had contrasting views, didn't we? But I think you nailed it. You were onto something. Like they somehow fooled me. It takes quite a lot to fool me. It does, but I think they fooled me. And I'm not sure still how they managed to do it, Jonathan. But they have. What do you make of Malmo at the minute, especially this year? Obviously, from the European side first here. How important is it for them to actually give a good account of themselves?
Yeah, well, we'll swap chairs there, and we'll dip into Sweden. And I absolutely agree with you, Steve. To be honest, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of, I think Conference League would have probably suited them more, even though it would have been more probably uproar if they'd have got maybe knocked out of the qualifiers and got demoted down there to that level. But it's like you said, Steve. I think that might have, in a weird way, in the medium to short term, might have helped them, because I do think they could potentially go and run in that competition and maybe look at the latter stages and maybe, like you've just said, emulate them and do a Djurgården. So I think you make a very good point there. And I've said it in previous shows, I do think there's a psychological element to Malmo where it's a bit like everything was rosy. They were winning the league for fun. Everything was fantastic. And then Djurgården popped up and got to the semi-finals of a European competition. And it was like, hang on a minute. If these lot can do it, why can't we do it? And, you know, the irony of it is the team that's called Djurgården, isn't it, Steve? Sometimes you look at your garden and you look at your neighbour's garden and you think, they've got some quite nice rosy flowers. Why haven't I got those rosy flowers? And it is that kind of grass is greener element, isn't it, Steve, a little bit? Because if you rewind a year ago, everything was tip-top with Malmo. We were all writing Y-Scout blogs about how Rydström's revolutionised football. You had Brighton and Hove Albion inviting him for meetings just to sort of keep tabs on him. You know, everything was fantastic. This season, then, it's just gone pear-shaped. And I do really genuinely think the European run of Djurgården has kind of has sort of like scrambled Malmo's fans' brains a little bit and just created that element of, you know, bit of not jealousy, but just we want a bit of that. You know, we're the big dogs of Sweden, and we want a piece of that. So I think it started there. You know, the European games again, they disappointed. They sort of flattered to deceive last season, didn't they, in Europe, Steve, and kind of went out with really a bit of a whimper, to be honest. And it's kind of trickled down from there, Steve. I think the squad. I mean, we have to talk about funnily enough, those two teams played each other this weekend, and Djurgården have gone to Malmo and got a 1-0 late win. Priska with a late goal. I'm surprised he's still in the league. There was a lot of rumours he would be leaving, and he didn't quite leave. We'll talk about transfers in a bit, but that has really ramped up the pressure on Rydström now. There's a lot of reports potentially saying, or a lot of scrutiny on his job. And I know we had a bit of a talk about Malmo, didn't we, after the Copenhagen game, Steve, didn't we, 2-3 weeks back, where they got absolutely taken apart in Europe by their sort of next door neighbours. And there was the whole discussion about them being a bit arrogant, maybe. And it's kind of that still rumbled on, really. The results have been poor since then. If you look at the game, Steve, since then, they just haven't really put it together at any point. You know, Rydström's talked about injuries, and, he came out after the Djurgården game and said that if you look at his bench, he wasn't able to put out a full bench, and he's talked about maybe the squad is a bit imbalanced. He said that Malmo can learn from this, and maybe it's about they know what they need to do now for the summer, for the winter. Sorry, maybe alluding to the fact that he doesn't maybe think the squad is good enough, but the squad has been stacked, hasn't it? Really. So I don't think on a domestic front you can complain. People are saying now the ambition is to finish third, but for Malmo, that is really stretching it, isn't it? Pontus Jansson came out and said he's been embarrassed to walk around the town. People are giving you dirty looks. It's really unraveled at Malmo this season, and there are strong feelings that a parting of the ways with Rydström could come. I think he might be looking at it, Steve, as well himself, and thinking, should I maybe have jumped last year? When everything was great and my stock was really high. There was a lot of German teams having a look at him, if not Brighton, and as I mentioned, other sort of English clubs. Maybe we've seen managers like the Leicester City manager Marti Cifuentes. We've seen other managers go from Sweden. He might have looked at that and thought, maybe I should have jumped when I could have, because his stock is declining a little bit. He made a joke about the Djurgården game, and said even after the first game when we beat them, we got criticised in the first game this season against Djurgården away from home. So, he kind of said it's a results business, and whatever happens, you're judged on results no matter where you are. So, but I do think there's probably a little bit deep down, he's probably a little bit rankled by all this. I think he might be thinking, do I need all this? Am I a bit above it? It's an interesting dynamic, really, because there's a sense that I think he maybe feels he's a little bit bigger than Malmo now in some ways. Like, it feels like the criticism to him is a bit quaint. I don't know if he's really that bothered about it. He's a bit kind of like, I'm above this, but of course he's still part of the club, and I do wonder if that the rumours maybe distracted him a little bit. I'm not sure what is at the heart of Malmo. But all I can tell you, Steve, I just think that the squad isn't great. I think that, we talked about it on the last show, so I won't dwell on it. But we also have to praise Djurgården. I thought it was a strong performance. You've been big on Djurgården, and we have talked about this off air, haven't we, in terms of you've really rated Djurgården and thinking they're due for a massive upturn, and I've been a bit not convinced. So that was an interesting one at the weekend. But yeah, Malmo they're just not on it, Steve, at this moment in time. It's not going well for them. And when you look at Europe, I think the distraction will be good. But when you look at some of the games they've got, you've just mentioned they alluded Goretz. That will be from the way you portray it, it could be a tough game. I'm not sure how many games they can really go into with sort of full confidence that they're going to win. If I'm being honest, just looking at some of the games now, Pilsen away, okay, possibly Dinamo Zagreb, of course, they've been in the Champions League, Panathinaikos, Forest away, well, that's going to be a cracker, isn't it? Memories of the 70s European Cup final, of course, the Forest team with Brian Clough that beat Malmo in the final, and that'll be a special game for all concerned. I think they've invited that team I think they've invited that Malmo team to the City ground for that game, so that's really going to be a really special night for both clubs. Porto away will be a really tough game, and Genk as well. I think that's a tough game. So and Svedstva, don't know if I pronounce it right. Krivna Svedsta.
Just say Red Star.
Just say Red Star. So I think they have some tough games, and I'm not convinced the squad is good enough really to get a huge amount of points from those matches. But Steve, a lot of those games are at the end of the season. Will Reece even be there by the end of the season?
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. 4 of the 8 fixtures are after the league phase of the Allsvenskan. The big problem is going to be able to. I mean, I say big problem. The squad is big. It should be able to cope with the Euro games and domestic games, and it generally coped quite well in the middle of the summer with this. So, but having said that, the fixtures they've got immediately after Europa League is Värnamo at home. Well, that's not a problem. They'll win that. But then after Plezenia away, Sirius on the road. Now, that's the sort of place they've struggled actually in recent years, Sirius. So that could be an upset. And then they've got Hammarby after the Dinamo Zagreb fixture. And then Gais after Panathinaikos. And that's the last match of the season, Malmo versus Gais. That could be a battle for third place on the line last game of the season. I don't think it will. I think Djurgården are going to get third place. But we'll come to that soon. There was a question from Big Sig. Thank you very much, Big Sig, for this. And we'll talk about the Eliteseiren side of the question soon. But he says, will Malmo not finishing in the European places hurt Sweden's coefficient in the long run? And will Malmo manage to get back into the European places? I mean, I guess that's a prediction for this season. Now, will they get in the top 3? They could still win the Swedish Cup in the spring, and that would get them into Europe as well. In terms of the coefficient, Jonathan, do you see that being a problem?
I think that's a really good question. Coefficient always kind of it's a bit of a moot point in some ways, because I in a lot of ways I don't really care about the coefficient. I think teams, if you look at it I look at it on merit. It's like saying, we'll come to Mjällby in a bit, of course, and what's going on there. But it's almost like saying, is Mjällby winning the league a bad thing? And then you can almost start to frame it as like, do unexpected teams winning, is that bad? Because of the coefficient and things like that. And I think that's dangerous territory, because I think that's what a lot of UEFA and FIFA's biggest problem over the last 10 years has been, really, isn't it? Trying to sort of like rig, for want of a better word, almost, without wanting to get sued or whatever, but almost trying to sort of engineer these tournaments so that they can keep the bigger teams in it, which I'm massively against. I don't like it. So I don't like to really talk about coefficients that much, because I think football should be more about merit. If it was up to me, Steve, I would bin this whole coefficient idea, to be honest, or I would massively water it down. I don't see why someone like Mjällby winning the league should be penalised, either for the league itself or for the team itself, against other teams. Because if Mjällby win the league, why do they, just because Malmo won it 2 years ago, why does that give them a better seeding? In my opinion, Steve, the champions should get the best seedings. So that's a debate for another day, maybe, just in terms of in Europe in general, you know what I mean? I think winners should get the best favoritism. So, if Mjällby were to win, I think they should be one of the best seeds for next season in the Champions League, or, if they were to qualify, of course. Teams like Glimt were consistently winning. But that's a side point. So obviously Malmo not doing well will hurt Sweden's coefficient, because they have the most points. They're the most reliable team. They're the richest team. They're the most established Swedish team. So that of course, from that point of view, it can't do anything but hurt. And he talks about sort of, how will they do for the rest of the season? Will they get into Europe? It is interesting when you look at their expected goals, Steve. According to our partners, Wyss Huddle, they are still top of the league for expected goals, 44.47 in this league. They're miles clear of Mjällby, by the way, for XG. But they're just not putting the ball, in the back of the net. And they've scored way less than Mjällby. and they've scored way less than a lot of other teams. In fact, I think they're level with Sirius for goals scored, which about sums it up. When you look at the expected goals against, Steve, that's, they're third in the league for that. But, expected goals doesn't tell the full picture, does it? Of course, okay, you might look at underlying metrics and you might say, well, maybe Malmo should be a little bit better. Maybe things will even out, as we often have this debate, haven't we, Steve, in the past about, where does XE sort of even out and how much do you read into it? That debate that we've had many a time. But the bottom line is, Malmo just, as of now, they're in sixth place. They are struggling. They're not looking amazing, really, with 6 games to go. I think they are in a bit of a battle for that third spot because they're 4 points behind Oikor. You've still got Guys and EFK Göteborg going quite well, although the results this weekend have maybe helped Malmo a little bit with EFK losing as well at home. You've talked about Djurgården, who are just behind them, 1 point behind them. They've still got Elfsborg in there as well, maybe if they can buck up their ideas a little, but I think they will. They are in for a battle to even get top 3. And Rydström alluded to it. He said after the Djurgården game, he put it back on the commentator and he said to the interviewer, and he said, "Well, where do you think we should finish? Where do you think we should finish?" And the commentator said to him, "Top 3, third." And he said, "Well, there you go then. So come back to me when it happens, because third is about all we can aim for this season." If you know what I mean, he almost tried to say, "Well, it doesn't really matter about game to game. It's just about where do we finish now." So it's an interesting question. I think at the end, the bottom line of it is that they're not in a great place. I think they've got recruitment wrong over the last few years, Steve. I think they've got a lot of... I'd put it this way. A lot of the best players in the league over the past 2 years, in my opinion, are not Malmo players. If you look at the stars of the league over the last maybe even 2 to 3 years, if I was to write a list of my top 10 players in Allsvenskan in the last 2 years, I don't think there'd be too many Malmo players. Nanasi would be obviously a rock in that top 10. But apart from that, Hugo Bolin, for example, is one who we really expected much bigger things from. Maybe you'd have some veterans in there, like your Keith Italians, your Pontus Janssens. Don't get me wrong, they've had some good players, Cornelius, Busanello. I'm not saying that they're bad players, but if you look at the sort of real stars of the league, Steve, do you know what I mean? When you look at recruitment, who's being sold for the most money? A lot of them are other clubs like Hammarby, like Djurgården, have just sold quite a few players, haven't they, recently? Like Bergvall to Spurs, who's doing so well now. Hacken, EFK Göteborg. So really, Malmo, I think a lot of their issues is with recruitment. Some of the players they've brought in just haven't been of the level of a Malmo FF, in my opinion. And I often think about this when I talk about Manchester United. It's like you need big balls to play at these big clubs, Steve. It's not just about signing a player who's quite good. Players need to also have personality. And it's like what Janssen said there, right? When you lose at Malmo, you can't leave your house because everyone's looking at you like he literally said, people look at me like I'm dirt, when we don't win. He's dropping off his kids to school parties and everyone's looking at him. And it's a bit like that. That's what it's like at big clubs. It's not just about, are you a good player? It's can you handle it when you don't get a result? Anyone can play quite good games, but you need big shoulders to play at those sort of clubs. And so it's a little bit different, Malmo, what they need. And I'm just not sure they have enough players of that caliber. If you widen it out, this is a bit of a write-off this season, isn't it? Hammarby and Mjällby have been way better than them. I'm not convinced they'll get top 3. I think they might just about nab it, but I'm not convinced at all. And all in all, Steve, it's been a really disappointing season, and I think there are a lot of question marks for them.
It's going to be a real battle to get the top 3. I'm just looking at the underlying metrics here for Malmo. I mean, in terms of expected goals against, they've actually overachieved, incredibly. So from a defensive perspective, I think you could say mostly job done. Offensively, typically where there's different sources that you look at, roughly underachieving by about 6 goals. That's the big problem. The goals just haven't been. They've not been. A team like Malmo, you would expect to overachieve their expected goals, surely. With the individuals that they have, they should be, at the end of every season, they should be saying minimum 5 goals overachievement, maybe even 10, because that's what the best teams do. So they've somehow lost this goal scoring ability. Also the ability to score low XG chances. I don't know whether they're not shooting enough from range. I don't know. Something's gone awry there. And then, this third place battle with 6 teams in it. And at the minute, they're not looking like getting it. Although all the other teams up there have been dropping points as well at certain points. Djurgården are the team on a roll. I think Djurgården are going to win at least 5 of their last 6 games, looking at the fixtures. For me, they've only got one tough game, and that's against Gais. That could be the determining fixture, whoever gets 3rd or 4th, because Gais are looking really good still. IEK, I watched them this evening against Norrköping. Yeah, they had a few players missing out, but they just didn't put in a performance at all. They've got their deficiencies. IFK Gothenburg, just when you think they're on a roll, they go and lose at home to Bromma-Poikina. Didn't even score against them. So, 3rd place battle is really good. But it's quite clear that the title's going to be going to one of 2 teams, and Mjällby do remain this incredible fairy tale story of Mjällby. 57 points for them on the board, 49 for Hammarby. Just 1 defeat for Mjällby. But maybe for the first time in a long time this season, a hiccup for Mjällby. 1-0 up against Osters at home, doing their job, win a penalty with about 15 minutes to go. Penalties missed, and then they concede to Osters, who are in the relegation zone. 1-1 draw. And then the next day, Hammarby win 4-0 against Häcken. So to cut the gap to 8 points, Jonathan, is that... Look, titles are never won that easily, are they? There's going to be stumbling blocks. It feels to me like it just, when we look back on it, it will just be a stumbling block. But can a moment like that, can that derail this Mjällby team, or are they mentally strong enough to overcome it?
Well, the first thing to say, Steve, is I was looking at Mjällby earlier, and obviously we didn't talk about the last couple of games where they took that 10-point. We didn't do a pod last week, so when they went 10 points clear, and people were pretty much saying this is done and dusted, we didn't quite talk about that. But Steve, I just got one stat really for you on Mjällby, and this blows my mind, to be honest. 16 games unbeaten currently. They've lost 1 game all season. They're nearly, apart from that E14 game where they lost away from home on the 11th of May, they would be on for a perfect unbeaten season at this stage with 6 games left. It is absolutely unbelievable what they are doing, to be honest. This is, we had a bit of foresight, haven't we, Steve? We talked to Torstensson years ago, and we've also recently had their assistant manager, Karl-Marius Axum, on a recent show where we talked about his methods. We've beaten the international media to it, Steve, haven't we? Because they've been everywhere you can find Mjällby at the moment. I've seen them on the BBC website. I've seen them on The Guardian, like I said at the top of the show. We've seen them on the New York Times. Everyone's talking about them now. But of course, we talked to the people involved very early on. But even when you sort of know the context of it like we do, and listeners of the show, of course, will know a bit more about Mjällby, having listened to those podcasts and studied it through us, maybe listening to the show. Even when you know about what Mjällby have got behind the scenes with some of the talented people working there, it is still unfathomable that they can go 16 games unbeaten. So, yeah, it will probably go down as a blip. 8 points clear. Let's face it, Steve, if they were to blow the league now, it would be, in my opinion, not only a great shame, but it would not only be one of the biggest bottle jobs in the history of football, I think, in some ways, but it would also be a bit of a great shame, because I feel like they almost deserve it for everything they've done, Mjällby. Just given the budget, like how small a town this is, how small a club this is, for everything they've had to achieve, for all the upheaval in the summer with players sort of, either nearly leaving, as in the case of Mane, or leaving officially, like Tornqvist or Rockjar, and then obviously being loaned back in the case of Tornqvist. But, even to sort of keep the team together has been an achievement, in my opinion, given so many Wolves circling around their players. To just fall at the final hurdle would be a real shame. They've got 6 games left. Bromma-Poikina away, Elfsborg at home, IFK Göteborg away, Norrköping at home, Värnamo away, who are pretty much down, and then Häcken at home. You'd like to think they can probably get this wrapped up fairly soon. They don't need a huge amount of points really to be champions now. They basically need 4 wins, and then they'll be champions. So I always think, Steve, with the Osters game, we have to give credit to Osters. Of course, they got a new manager. Martin Foyston was fired a few weeks ago by the sporting director, Ola Larsson, who, of course, I worked with when he was at IFK Göteborg last year, former sporting director of IFK Göteborg. He's now in at Osters as their sporting director, and his first job was to sack the Englishman, Martin Foyston. So they've had a new management gone in. They've got a decent result there, a bit of a turn up for the books. But if we revert and talk back about Mjällby, of course, I always think with teams who've never won it before or who've not been in this situation, the games become harder, Steve. I know it's sort of like they're nearly there. I saw everyone talking about it last week, saying 10 points, it's done. But in some ways, that's the worst time to be a Mjällby player or a Mjällby fan. Because once people start saying it's done, the only way now is down, isn't it, Steve, in some ways? Because all you can do now is bottle it. So they still have to get this job done. And I think that draw might just put a few, doubts maybe in the minds of some of the fans and players. The big win really was the Gais away game 2 weeks ago against when they went to Gais and won 2-0. That was when everyone started to say, "No, this is a done deal." They obviously followed that up with the Halmstad win, but the wins are narrowing, aren't they, Steve? 1-0 against Halmstad, 1-0 against Degerfors, and now a draw with Oster. That's 3 of the worst teams in the league. So if you look at it from that point of view, Brøndby and Elfsborg, EFK, they are better teams statistically than the ones they've just played. So from that logic, the games are about to get tougher. So if they were to lose 1 or 2, I think it was very important, Steve, that Hammarby followed it up the next day by absolutely battering Beck or Hacken, who were really having a bit of a torrid time of things, in my opinion, because it just meant that, if Hammarby had failed to win that, for example, they would have really thrown it away. So if you look at Hammarby back-to-back 4-0 wins now in their last 2 home games, obviously they drew at Djurgården in the Stockholm derby last week. That was a really entertaining game, by the way. But they've now got to go to Halmstad and EFK as their next 2 games. Then they've got another Stockholm derby, and then Hammarby have got Malmö away. So their next 4 games are also a bit of a challenge. Halmstad just about fighting for their lives. EFK, I think they've had a good season, to be fair. So although they've had a blip this weekend against Brøndby, so Stockholm derbies are always difficult, and then they've got Malmö away, who you might even say that might be one of the easier games of the 4. But I think it's important that Hammarby keep on their toes. I still think 8 points is catchable, because I think if Mjällby lose 1, it could be down to 5, and then I still think there's enough leg room in the title race. There's still enough rope there to maybe hang themselves in some way. So hopefully that wouldn't happen, because I think it would be a shame. But you've also got to credit Hammarby if they can keep up their momentum, because they have been an exciting team to watch this season as well. And I think they've brought good value to the league.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. You're absolutely right that the margin of wins have been narrowing. They haven't really been that convincing against Halmstad, Degerfors, or Osters. But what I will say about those teams, they're fighting for their lives. There's teams down there now are actually showing something, because this is now, lives are at stake. Well, not lives, but contracts are at stake. Their players' futures are at stake. So sometimes these teams at the bottom are the hardest ones to face. But the difference between Mjällby and Hammarby, whenever they face one of the poor teams, Hammarby obliterate bad teams. But Mjällby are better against facing the stronger teams. Hammarby seem to struggle in the really big games against the tougher opponents. Don't know why that is. Could be a coaching thing. Mjällby still maybe deep down feel like underdogs in those fixtures, and they're better for it. So I think there's maybe a couple of twists to come. The next 2 games just look, I mean, Brøndby are away and Elfsborg at home. I don't know. Those are sort of middling teams, aren't they? That they could go either way. And then IFK Gothenburg away. I don't see 3 wins, Jonathan. But I did my calculations. I actually think Mjällby will get more points in the last 6 games than Hammarby will. So work that out. But it's not it reminds me of Leicester. It's just like Leicester, isn't it? When Leicester were trying to get to the title, they started to win games 1-0 rather than 4-3. They, were scraping by, fighting really hard for every point. And thankfully, the teams around them, like Spurs, I think it was, were dropping points. And the same thing kind of maybe is happening. Just want to mention some underlying metrics with Mjällby. About a 15 expected goals against overachievement, and nearly a plus 10 goal overachievement in terms of XG. So, look, they have, Lot would say that's unsustainable, that's lucky. I suppose title-winning sides have got to have this overachievement, though, haven't they, right? That just shows you they've just, in both boxes, they've been exceptional. In terms of the underlying metrics, they're like a 5th or 6th best team in Allsvenskan.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what's quite interesting as well, Steve, from that point of view? I did want to talk about transfers, and we've pulled up the summer, the summer transfers, because I think the transfer window has played a big part in the dynamics of this league this season. Um, if you look at Hammarby, for example, they've lost Tunekti, who's gone to Celtic. They've lost a few other key players who have left the league. Pinas left the league, who I thought was probably the best left back in the league. Um, and when you contrast it with Mjällby, Steve, you look at Abdoulaye Mane, who was on the brink of moving to Olympiacos. The move fell through, and there's a lot of controversy around that move, by the way, which maybe we'll touch on another time. A lot of back and forth there. Of course, Marinakis involved, isn't it? That's his team, the Nottingham Forest owner. So never controversy is never too far away from that club in some ways if you do your digging. But there was a lot of rumours about the quote unquote failed medical of Mane and pressure being put on him. He's only scored one goal in 13 games, Steve. He had an incredible start to the season. Obviously, their main striker, Karl Marius Axum, said on the Nordic Football Podcast he thinks he could play in the Premier League one day. He thinks he's a top striker, but he's really gone off the boil a little bit. And they've had to spread the goals around, haven't they? People like Stroud stepping up, Herman Johansson stepping up with goals. Midfielders have had to step up. So you're right in terms of the XG, but they've also had to share the goals around. Since Mane went off the boil, they haven't really had a out and out proper clinical goal scorer. Hammarby have got Basara. I think he's the top goal scorer in the league. He's got about 15 goals this season. He is a rock solid stud player, right? And he has been exceptional this season. I think he's been probably the pound for pound best player in the league. But Malby have had to sort of spread it around, and they haven't had as much. They're not running out of steam, but they are sort of things are.
I can sense it. There's just a sense, isn't there? They're not hanging on or anything, but it's just like they're doing enough each week to get by, and it looked like they were going to do enough again. I think the criticism you can have again in the Osters game is, all right, they go 1-0 up, great, but they're not looking to really extend that advantage too much. They're getting the goal and they're relying on the defense, which is really good, by the way, and it's not the worst strategy in the world. And even at 1-1, I felt, do you know what? They feel like a point's okay after what's happened. I've seen some teams actually lose games like that. You miss a penalty, then you concede 2 late goals. So, by the way, a point wasn't a terrible outcome with the advantage they've got. But do you think it's going to get dramatic, Jonathan, or are they going to sort of win this with 2 or 3 games to go?
But that's the thing, isn't it, Steve? They say in psychology, your things are worse when you got something to lose rather than something to win. Human beings, we're more scared about what we might lose than what we can win. And that's why I said when they went 10 points clear and everyone's saying it's done, that to me, that's the most dangerous position to be in, because then all you can do now is lose. And from a human psychology point of view, that is when it will become hardest, because then, like you said, Steve, you're getting one goal and you're like, right, let's cling on to this. We don't want to lose anything here, rather than maybe going for it. But I also think the squad dynamics play a part in that. And that's what I mean about losing players like Rockjar or some of the transfers they've had. I do think Hammarby have also been shorn of a few players, in the transfer window, which has affected them a little bit as well. When you look at some of the transfers they've had, I think they do miss some of the players that they've lost, like Pinas. Although it's not happened at home, I thought in the derby, I thought they were defensively a little bit all over the place. So both teams have had to sort of deal with a little bit of adversity. I do agree with what you said there, Steve. I do think they're going to stumble a little bit over the line, maybe. It's looking that way, but I still think they'll win the league. It would be I almost don't want to predict them to not win the league, because I think the whole of Sweden would be disappointed if they were to bottle it, except Hammarby fans. I certainly know clubs in Stockholm that would be gutted if Mjällby threw it away now. A few rival clubs of Hammarby's, but I think we will learn now what is their champion mentality in this, and that's what winning a title is all about, right? You've got to navigate different scenarios, and this is now when we'll find out their champion mentality. Because Steve, they obviously went, they won 5 in a row, didn't they, in the summer? Then they drew with Djurgården, then they won 3 in a row. Gais away, as I said, Halmstad, Degerfors away. So they've got, if they can do that in the next 3 games, the title's pretty much theirs. So Brøndby are always an up and down side. Elfsborg are not in the best place at the moment in time. They've lost a few players. The Egbe has been sold to Metz. Their main one of their best centre backs. They're not in an amazing position, I don't think, at the moment. EFK away is just, although EFK having a great season, they are prone to the odd rick, aren't they? Like they've lost to Bromma Poikina at home this evening. So that's not guaranteed here or there, is it really? Mjällby have the ability to go there and win. But I think the most important thing for me, Steve, is that they don't lose either of the next 2 games. Even if they were to get 2 points, maybe they go to Bromma Poikina and draw, or I think they should probably win that game. But let's just hypothetically say they went to Bromma Poikina and drew. I just think they can't lose any of the next 3 matches, really, EFK away as well. Because I think if they lose a couple or they drop, say, 4 points, drop 5 points, maybe say 1 draw, 1 defeat in the next 3, they'd really start to wobble and worry. I don't think anyone else is catching them. If you look at other teams, I don't think EFK are going to catch them. I don't think they're good enough. I don't think they score enough goals. If you look at even, they're miles behind in terms of goals scored. But that would be the wobble for me. But I think one thing I have to say, Steve, before we wrap this section, I think we have to commend both Hammarby and Mjällby, because for me, I don't think it's been a vintage Allsvenskan year, really. But those are the 2 teams for me that have made this league worth watching. I think the rest of the league, I've not been that impressed. But I think Mjällby and Hammarby, they've given this league, it's been their story this season. So I'd like to think the league can maybe they can have a little bit more of a title race. Maybe we have a bit more drama towards the end. But I think both clubs have done really well this season, and they both deserve massive credit.
Yeah, I mean, to say officially just 11 points needed. That is if Hammarby go completely faultless in the last 6 matches. And I don't see that with the fixtures they have. They've still got to go, like you said, to EFK, the Stockholm derby against AIK, Malmo away. Those matches in a row are not easy. And, I still think the pain of conceding in the 97th minute against Djurgården was probably worse than what happened to Mjällby at the weekend. Where it looked like they were going to beat Djurgården, they were 2-0 up, weren't they? And then 3-2 up, and then the goalkeeper nearly pretty much equalised, didn't he? But anyway, yeah, before we move on to the Allsvenskan section, we've got to talk about the relegation situation, especially one match on Monday. It was Värnamo were drinking at the last chance saloon, weren't they? Home against Halmstad. It was pretty much win or go down. And they got off to a good start. They they won the first half 1-0. And then things turned around sour, sadly for them. And they're now on 12 points after a 2-1 defeat. Degerfors on 19. Degerfors have definitely shown a bit more fight recently, I'll say that. Oster's 22. Halmstad 25. Häcken knocking on the door of relegation on 26 points. Sirius 26 as well. Värnamo 1, Halmstad 2. There was 45 shots in the game nearly. I have to say this was one of the best watches I've had this season. But no bugger could finish apart from an incredible own goal, which you're going to tell us about.
Well, I mean, I don't know what that own goal was about, to be honest. Värnamo have just been, I mean, they're down now, aren't they? Let's face it. It's not official yet. Is it official? No, it's not official yet. 6 games to go. That's 18 points. So, no, not quite, but nearly. They're 13 points off safety, getting out of the water. They're 10 points off maybe a lifeline in the relegation playoff against Oster. They're 7 points behind Degerfors, who were second bottom. So they really are cut adrift. But tonight was just a bizarre game. They had a chance to get out of it. And, you look at their previous game where they threw that away as well. I don't know what's going on with Värnamo, to be honest. They were 3-2 up, Steve, in stoppage time. And they went on to throw that away to Osters in the 93rd and 96th minute, I think it was. Kai Meriluoto scored a hat-trick. He looked quite tasty, by the way. He scored a hat-trick for Värnamo. They've had a lot of squad upheaval. They have got 1 or 2 players who are decent, in my opinion. They do actually have a couple of okay players. They've reshaped the squad a little bit. They've got the centre-back, Mohamed, who I think is a really good prospect. I think he's one of the tallest players in the league, is it, or something like that? He's got one of the best aerial duel percentages in Allsvenskan, something along those lines. But yeah, they just, everything looking all right, and then they just threw it away in the last minute. And again, Steve, in this game, I don't know what your perspective on this match was, but obviously they took the lead with I thought, a really nice goal from Zialkovic. At times in the game, they looked pretty comfortable. They took the game to Halmstad. Obviously, Halmstad have lost their main man, Yannick Ignero. He was sold to Lech Poznan. I did say we'd talk a little bit about transfers if there's time. Obviously, he was sold for 2.2 million euros to the Polish league, and he'd been their main player. But out of nowhere, Steve, Varma just threw it away. Like you said, the own goal was. I mean, I thought it was harder to actually score an own goal than to clear that. It looked. I mean,
It's incredible.
If you get a chance to see it, please do watch it because I can't get my head around that own goal. I thought it was very, very weird. And then, yeah, obviously, Granat scored, didn't he, straight after half time, Steve? But the Victor Larsson own goal was, even the way he sort of, like when he scored the own goal, he was just sort of sheepishly sort of scratching his head as if it was like, well, oh well. Like, weird vibes with Varnamo. Just a weird team all around.
Well, I actually thought when I saw his reaction that maybe it was disallowed immediately because he didn't seem like that bothered to me. It was strange, wasn't it? It was a very strange reaction. But I mean, Varnamo should have been 3 or 4 goals up at half time. This match was played at a blistering pace, a million miles an hour. I've not seen anything quite like it. The referee couldn't keep up. Victor Wolf, in fact, the ball hit him a couple of times. He couldn't keep up with play. But the amount of chances that were missed. I mean, Varnamo underachieving their expected goals by 15. And bad things happen to bad teams. I've always said this in whatever sport. And they proved it here. Halmstad won't know how they've really got out and won this game. They're out of the relegation zone now, Halmstad. But they look worryingly porous as well to me here. So that battle at the bottom there, who are you going to... I mean, Varnamo, we're saying they're down. Who do you think is going to be 14th and 15th, Jonathan? Because there's a couple of bigger teams sweating a little bit. Norrköping with a big win. They always seem to do this whenever they get threatened. They come up with a big performance at home on a Monday night. Sirius and Häcken, surely they've got the quality to avoid it. Are we in a case of Osters, Halmstad, Degerfors? 2 from 3?
Well, yeah, you've got your Norrköping through. I thought it was a massive gamble from Oster, to be honest, to sack Martin Foyston because I thought he was starting to get some momentum. Obviously, maybe it's a bit of English favoritism. It's nice to have an English manager, but although until he got to the Norrköping and the Hammarby games, obviously Osters, they'd gone on a run of 4 unbeaten, 3 draws, and then they went to Häcken and won 2-0, and it looked like things were maybe turning slightly. Obviously, a brave decision to pull the trigger. But Roberts Björksson has come in. He's been at Osters in the past, obviously, maybe kind of coming back, and that side of it, maybe that sort of interim coach role, returning to a club he knows what inside out. He was there in 2014, although I think he did get relegated with them. But maybe a familiar face was just something a bit safer, maybe. That was about 3 weeks ago now, roughly, just under 3 weeks. So, of course, some of the games, I think his first game was, maybe it was can't remember which game was his first game, to be fair, maybe the international break he had. But, obviously the past 2 games, of course, they've got 4 points as well, and they've gone to Mjällby and got a really creditable draw there. They've got IFK Göteborg next, and then they've got Halmstad at home. So that's going to be a massive game. I think they could actually take points off IFK Göteborg as well. So Osters are the one that I think they've got a very good chance of getting out of it. Halmstad, I find a bit of a strange team. I think they've lost a few players that like Egnera, that I really think are important to them. Häcken are the interesting ones, Steve, because I think they're in real big trouble. And then there's obviously this Sirius Degerfors game was a bit of a dagger as well. I saw on Allsvenskan Fantasy, everyone had loaded their team with Sirius players, thinking that Degerfors will get peppered. And it's a bit of a turn up for the books in that one because they've turned it around, Degerfors, and given themselves a little bit of a lifeline there. Of course, the manager there has gone in and he's looking to change things, and that was their first win, Steve, since May when they went to Norrköping and won. So a humongous result really for Degerfors because they were really looking in big trouble. Obviously, they got that draw away to Malmo at the end of August as well, which didn't help Malmo's mood, really did it, considering Degerfors pretty much lose every other game. So, yeah, as of now, I still think Degerfors are going to struggle to survive. I think if it was Osters or Halmstad, I would just about favour Osters. So from that point of view, maybe I'd see Halmstad and Degerfors in the bottom 3. So maybe I can't remember my pre-season predictions, but it's the one I'll really look at is Häcken because I think with Europe in mind, I think they're going to have a really difficult balancing act in terms of what do they do here? Are they going to stick or twist? Because they might have to sacrifice Europe. Otherwise, they could face potential relegation. And relegation for Häcken would be catastrophic for that club to go down after winning the league a few years ago. It would be terrible. I think they've got the makings of a squad that could go down. I think it's just too much. I don't recognise Hacken anymore, Steve. I'll say it like that. I do not recognise this team anymore. And they've just had so much upheaval. You don't know who's going to start. They've just had such a big player turnover. The manager, I'm not convinced. I know you're not a massive fan of this manager historically, Steve. In the past, since we've done this podcast, you've always had a few words about him. But I think they got to be careful, Steve, because Hammarby took them apart at the end of the day. Okay, there was a brief period in the game where they were doing okay. At one point, they looked like they could, they went in at 0-0 and it looked like they could maybe do something. And then in the second half, they just got blown away. 49th, 52nd, 57th, and 70th minute, and they were 4-0 down. The derby, Steve, the week before against EFK Göteborg, they came up. They've lost 2 derbies back to back. At Gais and then EFK, which is never good for morale, is it? They beat Varnamo, of course, 5-1, but who knows what's going on with Varnamo these days. They lost at home to Oster, Steve. So they're really having a terrible summer. But
they are. I'm a bit. I mean, looking, Jonathan, they've got a run of fixtures here, starting on the 23rd of October. Raja Varkano at home in the Europa Conference League, AIK away, Malmo at home, Strasbourg at home, and then the last game of the season's away at Mjällby. That might be. I mean, who knows? Mjällby might be in celebration mode by then. It might be an easy game, but. I think Häcken have got to get the results in the next 3 league games. That's Norrköping at home, Brommapojken away, Sirius at home. They need to be getting 2 wins out of those 3, and then they can put to bed any relegation fears and enjoy the Conference League. But, I mean, you can't lose, some of the results they've had have been disappointing. I want to give a shout out to a team I rarely ever give a shout out to, and that is Degerfors, who have endured a lot of my criticism regularly. They are fighting for their lives recently. I've got to give them a lot of credit. They lost against, I think, AIK and Mjällby, but really gave a good account of themselves. Deserved a genuine draw at Malmo that day, and then they've gone and beat Sirius 3-1 from 1-0 down. I mean, I can't believe this. I thought Sirius would batter them, partly because Sirius is quite a good side at home. When they get on a roll, Sirius, very good side. And they got an early goal, but Degerfors have shown a bit of fight. Goitom was finally, and this is what I never understood about Degerfors when in the first few matches that he was in charge of. Goitom was always a fighter, wasn't he? He's a player for AIK, and it just didn't. The amount of times you cut to him on the sidelines, he looked a depleted figure. Finally, maybe that fight is showing something for Degerfors. So, for once, well done to them, and interesting to see. You don't want to be playing them right now, I don't think, Jonathan, Degerfors.
No, they're not out of it. And to be fair to Degerfors, I think they've recruited quite well. They've brought in a couple of players who I think are decent at least. They've got Marcus Rafferty, who he was formerly at Hammarby. He's not a bad player. Santi Harala as well. I think they've brought in. He's not too bad. So I think they've given themselves a bit of a lifeline with some of the transfers. Vukojevic is back. He was at one point really good for this level. So they've given themselves a lifeline. In summary, Steve, I mean, Sirius, I still think a bit of a strange team. I think the squad is way too good. I don't get how Leo Valter's still there, for example. I think is a really, I'm surprised he's not maybe gone to the Danish league or maybe sort of the Dutch league, somewhere like that. I think he's a very tidy player. In my opinion, Steve, it will be. I'm going to say I think Halmstad in the relegation playoff. I think Degerfors will potentially go down. I think it might be just maybe too late for them. I think Varnamo obviously toast, and then I think Osters might get out of it. But I really think the caveat here is that I think Häcken could drop into it. And then obviously, as you've just said there, I think Degerfors are a team to watch in the final 6 games because I think Goitom's always been a fighter. Like you said, he's been a warrior at Wyss. He's a legend of that club, and he's not someone who will back down from a challenge. They've got tough games though, Steve. They've got Elfsborg away, Djurgården at home. Then they've got the Halmstad game. Osters away will be critical. Then they've got Hammarby and Brommapojken. So it's just about can they get a bit of momentum because they're going to need a big win somewhere, whether it's going away to Elfsborg or beating Diff or beating Osters or someone like that. They're going to need a couple of big results, and I just wonder if the squad's good enough for that. Even if on the day they can get a result that's serious, I wonder if they can do that. But yeah, that's my prediction as of now.
Yeah, Djurgården are actually facing most of these teams down there. They've got Sirius, Degerfors, Varnamo, and Oster still to face. I think Djurgården are not a side you want to be facing at this point in the season. They're playing very well. Anyway, we will move on to Eliteseiren matters after the break. That was a great section, that was, on Allsvenskan. We'll catch you after this short break.
Welcome to part 2 of this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and as always, I'm joined by Steve Wyss. I hope you've had a cup of tea. Bit of a long section there. Obviously, we delved into Europe. We've delved into Sweden. Now we're moving to Norway, Steve. And the big news of the week, or last couple of weeks, of course, is at Molde. Have to start there. A lot's going on. We've got a title race. We've also got a few other things going on in the league. But, Steve, it's a team that we've kind of talked about a little bit, skirted over, and we've had a few discussions about them, and you've said from almost day one, really, that you're not convinced about this marriage between Per-Mattis Hogmo and Molde FK. And of course, about 8 days ago, Steve, we got the announcement saying that they had agreed to end their collaboration. So huge news out of Norway. I know there's been quite a few manager changes this season, Steve, but we've got to dig into that first. So talk to us about what's happened here, what's gone on, why, what's next, what are your thoughts? I want to hear all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it has been kind of an ongoing story on this podcast this season, hasn't it? When Molde made the managerial change pre-season, I was quite excited, wasn't I? Especially when they brought in Paco Johansson as the assistant. So, but I think fairly early on it was apparent. I can sense these things. And I think the biggest problem is the manager just not suiting the club and just not suiting the tactics either. Basically trying to play players in positions that they can't play in. And bringing in Hogmo, they needed probably 2 or 3 transfer windows to get the players that he wants. And it just wasn't working. And I can't remember what episode it was, but I said back him or sack him, didn't I? And looking back, they probably should have sacked him there and then. They backed him, and it didn't really do enough. They did find a bit of form recently. 4 wins out of 5, sort of mid-July through to the end of August. And we're thinking maybe they go back on track here. They're back on track. But they're 3 defeats in a row, losing to Godset away, which is not a good result this season. Then the home defeat to Fredrikstad was the final straw, really, for this. It was, I think that Hogmo himself in his statement said he agreed with the decision. So if he's agreeing with the decision, I've got to agree with the decision, really, haven't I? I think it makes sense. It's just not been a good fit. Doesn't mean Hogmo's a bad coach or manager by any means. Just not a good fit for the club. And what a dismal year for Molde. I predicted them second. I still think this squad should be doing an awful lot better than it is. I mean, where are they? They're as low as 11th. They're 6 points off relegation with 8 games to go. It's embarrassing, I think. And now all they've got to do is play for pride for the end of the season. Well, I say pride, the biggest game probably coming up next, Norwegian Cup. Strom's Godset away. The Norwegian Cup is going over the winter into the spring this year. So this is probably the biggest game for them. In the league, they just got to get 2 or 3 wins, make sure they stay up. And yeah, it will complete a miserable season for Molde.
Yeah, the underlying metrics don't really back them up at all as well. They're literally rock solid mid-tables club, 8th in the league for expected goals, according to our partners Wyscout, 8th in the league for expected goals against, according to our partners under Wyscout. Steve did a piece on physical metrics as well, so keep an eye out for that on the Wyscout blog. For listeners who want to read a little bit more of our insights, we obviously write a regular blog for Wyscout Huddle. Thank you to our partners as always. Steve, I've got to give you credit here because you went early on this. I remember saying to you, I think I actually said you were a bit outrageous to suggest that I think you called that they should sack him quite early. And I said, I think that's ridiculous. So, I'm a fair man when things are called correctly, and I thought you went too early, but maybe you were right in hindsight. And I think you are correct in some ways, isn't it? Because I think fit is an underrated aspect of football clubs with managers. Fit plays a huge part, and you only have to look at wider European matters. Ten Hag at Bayer Leverkusen, Steve, gone after 3 games. I don't always think it's a bad thing for clubs to identify that this is not a right fit very early and just get rid. This whole give managers time thing. Yes, I get it in some circumstances, but there are occasions where it is just a bad fit, isn't it, Stephen? In your opinion, was this just a case of it being a stylistically bad fit? And if so, why?
I think what has also been highlighted this season, though, is Mulder's squad, maybe over the last sort of 18 months, isn't in the position that they want it to be. So, yeah, I think he basically took charge of a group of players which didn't at all fit his style. I still think of Hogmo at his best in that Hacken championship winning team. And we've said it before, what do we associate that team with? Young talent, fast, energetic, good matches to watch, energetic. If we concede a couple of goals, we're scoring 3 or 4, right? 4-3-3 system as well, was it? I think it was 4-3-3. And that was nothing like that here at Mulder. Maybe he wanted to play that way, but he hasn't got the type of players for it. This is a team that has been morphed into this 3 at the back, 3-5-2 or whatever, 3-4-2-1. Genuinely lack of wingers in the squad. Wing back, full back, central, loaded with sort of central players, strikers that kept getting injured all the time, and yet they kept playing 2 up front. It's the sort of, he needed genuinely, I think, 3 or 4 transfer windows, but you don't really get that sort of time in football nowadays, do you? Especially at big clubs. But that said, I still think it's not good enough for what he had. He still had quite a lot of weapons at his disposal. Mulder really at worst. I mean, let's have a think here. Mulder should be, forget league position because they're actually only 4 points off 6th. They should be on par probably with the likes of Rosenborg, Tromsø, sort of between the 33 to 38 point mark as a bare minimum. So it is an underachievement. And now they've appointed 2 caretakers, I think, to the end of the season. Magna Hoseth and Daniel Hestad, former players. It's their job now to keep them in the Norwegian Cup, keep them up. And then I still think Mulder are maybe a sleeper team in the winter for next season to go, be a medal contender with the right managerial appointment and maybe get these transfers windows back on track.
Is there any chance Ole Gunnar Solskjaer might come back? I mean, just on that one, Steve, you said big clubs don't give managers 3 or 4 transfer windows. But I think the caveat would be unless you're Manchester United, where it seems you can do whatever you want for 3 or 4 transfer windows, and you're going to keep your job regardless. But let me not get into that, Steve. Is Solskjaer on the cards, or where do you think they'll go with this? Will they revert to type, or are they going to maybe look at something new and fresh? Where do you see Mulder going from here? Because as you said, the season's nearly a write-off.
I think if anyone's listening from
they're
Mulder,
still a big club at the end of the day.
Yeah, they're a big club, and they've got money as well. They've had a decent run in Europe in the last few years, but now it's really important for them. All that'll be wasted if they mess up in the winter transfer window, and the next. Mulder need to be getting back in the medals next year, no doubt about it whatsoever. Especially as they won't have any other distractions. They want to try and win the Norwegian Cup so they can get into European qualification. If anyone's listening from Mulder, and maybe there is, my advice to them would be to go back to the Mulder of 4 or 5 years ago. Get a manager who's going to play you 4-3-3. Go young players, wingers. Be that club. Avoid injury-prone players. Look in the background there at what's going on with the physical, with the training, because still too many players are getting injured at Mulder. And go back to what I would go with a younger manager. Probably, I think it didn't work with this manager, did it? How old is Hogmo? 50 odd, maybe. He's not that old, but he's not young either. Look what Rosenborg have done with their manager, and I know they're 5th, but they just look like they're making progress. I think they're making progress. I think Mulder need to go down that route. Quite who to get? I don't know. I think there's a few candidates which I could probably draw up a shortlist for at the end of the season. within the actual league itself. You could potentially look at the likes of the KFUM manager. We've had, Sanderfield have had a good season until recently. I don't know. I think I would look at a younger manager, though, who we can maybe bring a bit more energy in.
Yeah, and on that note, Steve, you hit the nail on the head, really, because the recent reports from TV2 came out that Molde did make an official approach for the KFUM manager, Johannes Mosgaard. There has been official contact confirmed. Their general manager, Tor Erik Stenberg. But positive news for KFUM is that he said, "We think it's very nice Molde is interested in our coaches. It means that we have done a good job of developing a coach who can take over bigger clubs, but we are clear this will not happen now. However, who knows what could happen in the future, Steve?" So is that maybe paving the way for
That'd be a good get him at the end of the season. I would get him at the end of the season. The only thing is he won't play the 4-3-3. He's a 4-3-4-3 merchant. Maybe that's why they're thinking of it, because still this squad is geared up for this 3 at the back system. So maybe it's just too much for them to move on quickly. But at least Mosgaard has proven himself in Eliteseiren and deserves a shot working with some more talented players.
Yeah, they did ask, TV2 did ask Mosgaard about that. He said, "I think I'll leave that to the club." 41-year-old manager said they'll answer that in the end. Obviously, they have the permission to let him speak to other clubs or not because he's under contract. He said Molde is a nice and great club, one of the top clubs in Norway. It would certainly be an exciting place to be. He was then asked, what would it take for you to leave KFUM? He said that there will come a day for everything. There's nothing to worry about right now. We've got a good group. We've become a very good football team. We're probably in the top 5 halfway through the last round against Viking. We've achieved high quality in everything we do. We're in good shape in all matches, and we're evenly matched with every team that we meet. So, I mean, Steve, if I'm reading between the lines there in football speak, that's basically see you at the end of the season.
I think it sounds like that, and it would be a good fit for the club in terms of the age. Like I said, the system. Look, if he's got his 3-4-3 to work at KFUM. I mean, KFUM's expected goals against stats the last 2 seasons are brilliant. I think they might even have the second best XG this season still. Last season, they had the second best XGA. So if he comes in, he knows how to obviously organise the side not to concede many chances. So you could get a completely different sort of Molde next year, winning a lot of games to 0, keeping clean sheets. You got to think. I mean, the problem at KFUM is they haven't maybe created enough chances. But if he's got higher quality players to work with, more individual ability, then you've got to think that could really work out. So I think they're looking in the right direction there, Molde, but they just got to get through the rest of the season, haven't they? I mean, they're not officially safe. They're 6 clear of the playoff spot. And they will have enough. I mean, they'd have to lose pretty much most of the remaining games, wouldn't they? But keeping the cup, get a bit of respectability going. But I could see the last few rounds, I could see them being on the beach a bit, teams that have just had that down season. Players don't really care. Some probably know they're going to leave the club. I don't think it's going to get much better for them before the end of this season.
Certainly a good manager to watch then, isn't it? The KFUM Muslim manager, Johannes Mosgaard. We'll keep an eye on that situation. And big news there, of course, as we said, coming out of Molde. Steve, if we look at the league, obviously further up the table, we have a title race. Level on points, 8 games to go, Steve. Bodø Glimt, 49 points. Viking, 49 points. Goal difference, plus 39, plus 23. A big goal difference. I mean, where Glimt get their goal scoring prowess from is just sensational, isn't it? Remember that nearly 100 goals, was it 100 goal season? They just score goals for fun. But Viking are not too far off it with 52 themselves. So both sides are sort of firing. Both sides are in the title race. You mentioned earlier, Brand, game in hand, 6 points behind. So, if they were to win the game in hand, they could narrow it to 3 points as well. They're not completely out of it yet, although a plus 11 goal difference is superior, vastly inferior to the other two. We've still got Tromsø in that 4th place spot as well, Steve. So that'll please a lot of their fans. Rosenborg in 5th. But let's just briefly touch on this title race. We talked about Glimt in part 1, their Champions League endeavours. That could, of course, distract them. Let's look at Viking because they're in a bit of decent form. They're unbeaten in their last 5, Steve. 4 out of 5 wins since they lost at home to Glimt 4-2 in July. They've won away at Bryn. They've won away at Sandefjord. They beat Rosenborg, which Bodø failed to do at the weekend. They then went to KFUM, of course, we just talked about, and they got a 2-2 draw. And then they've beaten Molde at the weekend with a goal from Kvia Eggeskog, 1-0. So you've been sort of up and down on Viking. I know there was a period of time where you were really high on them. There was a period you were worried they might get caught. But where do you sit on Viking at this moment in time? Has there been any transfers, anything changed that we should be wary of? What are your thoughts on Viking in this title race?
I think the big result we've got to mention was from just before the international break, where they beat Rosenborg 2-1 at home, but the big ramifications there came after the game, where the captain, Zlatko Tripic, got into an altercation with Pereira, the former Viking defender, and one of the assistant coaches at Rosenborg basically got him by the throat. All sorts of images were doing the rounds on social media, weren't they, and stuff like that. Tripic got banned for a couple of games, and they managed to get 4 points in his absence. I think he's back the next game, so that's a big boost for them. The KFUM match, they came from behind to get some points. I think it's not a terrible result. And then they managed to scrape. Molde actually gave a decent account of themselves in that match the weekend. Look, I think the last 2 episodes I've said it's Viking. I still think Viking can do it, and I still think they can, because Bodø Glimt will drop points in the midst of the Champions League. I said they would, and they already have. They've 1-1 draw against Rosenborg at the weekend. Again, on the face of it, is that a bad result? Probably not. Away to Rosenborg this time of year, a team that are probably back on the up again. So it's going to be really close. And Brann aren't out of it, to be fair to Brann. If they win their game in hand, they're not out of it. But I just think with the fixtures they have, plus the Europa League, it'd be really hard for them to catch. But nevertheless, they are in the race. I think Tromsø are probably just too far out of it, 7 points adrift now. Although Tromsø possibly have the easier fixture list of all 4 of them. But I think they're just too far behind. It's going to be nip and tuck right until the end of the fixture. There's some really, really crunch games to come up. Brann are facing both Glimt and Viking. Tromsø Viking on the 19th of October looks like a big game already. So, yeah, nip and tuck right to the one thing I'll say for Bodø Glimt, they've got the goal difference. So, and that's worth a point in itself, isn't it? I mean, they've got a massive goal difference now of 39, I think it is, and Vikings is about 10 or 15 less. So it might come to our goal difference, Jonathan.
Yeah, and they've got very similar expected goals against, actually, metrics-wise, according to our partners, Wyscout. KFUM are the best in the league for that, which is really praiseworthy. Only marginally, though, ahead of Glimt, 22.03 versus 22.06. And then you've got Brann in third and Viking, 24.88. So not a massive amount of expected goals against difference, really, there. When you look at Viking, it's more about the expected goals. Glimt's expected goals are just a joke, 57.17, Vikings 45.24, which isn't that bad in itself, really, but Glimt just blow them out of the water. Steve, possession stats, you've got Glimt with 62% ball possession, Viking are sort of like sixth in the league, with 52.1%. So, there's horses for courses. It depends how you want to play your football. Certainly in terms of results, though, Viking are hanging in there, aren't they? And they're not looking too bad at all. If you look at the upcoming games for Viking, Steve, obviously Europe is going to be a potential distraction, I think, but they've got Salzburg away, Brann at home, Tromsø away, then Bryn at home. What do you think is their ambition for the next 4 games, just to navigate those and then get to the final stretch? How do you see those games going? Brann obviously looking like a big one, but Tromsø away isn't going to be easy, is it?
No, I think they've got a few tricky games now. Salzburg away this weekend. Again, they should win it, but it's not a gimme. Brann at home and Tromsø away. And even Bryn at home that's a local derby. So most teams would easily beat Bryn at home, but for Bryn, that's like their cup final. So I do quite like the last 3 or 4 games for Viking. But look, this is now where they've historically wobbled. They've been in this position before. And around now is when they've dropped points. So will the same thing happen again? That's the big question. I think they've got a real chance because Glimt are very, very good. If Bodø Glimt only had to focus on the league, I would even wager that Glimt would win all 8 games. They're that good. But they've got Champions League to deal with. And this is not like in the past where they've had Europa League or Conference. They're facing big teams, proper big, tough games that are going to be on the body. So I think it's fair to say Glimt will drop some points. I don't think they'll drop a lot of points. Maybe they only win 6 of the last 8. So if that happens, Viking have got to be there to pounce. They've almost got to be... This is now their time to be faultless. It's a really big moment in Norwegian football, I think. If Glimt win the league, there's a really good chance they can nail down Champions League again next season. They could get there automatically on the coefficients as long as they get more points than Olympiacos in the group stage. And even if they didn't get that, they'd only have to get through one qualifying round again. If Viking win the league, it really is it'd be really important for them, and they would get a good run. There'd be minimum Europa League. It's a pivotal one. I think if Glimt win this league this year, they could go on a run. There's been a concern, haven't they? A few have said that it could be like Rosenborg back in the day, where Rosenborg I think they won about, was it 14 league titles in a row, 12 in a row? I'm not saying Glimt are going to do that, but they could really nail down a spot at the regular top table if they can get through this title. Let's see how it goes. We know they're a proven runner. They've done the course and distance, and Viking have historically wobbled, but they're not going to get a better chance. They've got the squad for it now. They've got no other distractions, and they're facing an opponent who will be distracted. So I think it's in Viking's hands, really.
Yeah, and that ties into what the question from Big Sig at Big Sig 5 on X. He said about Buda's draw to Rosenborg. Is that a sign of what's to come? So hopefully, now that the Champions League's underway, hopefully that answers your question, Big Sig. Steve, we've covered that title race now. I want to move on to a question from another loyal listener of this podcast, Skjotr, or at Stormen Sotta, who says, who's going down with Haugesund? I'm thinking Bryn doesn't survive, and he's posted a little screenshot on X of the bottom 4 in the league, Steve, which I'll read out to you now for listeners, or you can Google it and listen on. But in the bottom 4, we currently have Bryn on 13th, 21 points. Relegation playoff HamKam, 21 points, but just a slightly worse goal difference, minus 12 against minus 14. Bryn minus 12. Strøm's Godset, 19 points, 2 points further back, Steve. And then obviously the Haug, who the only way they're going to win a match is if we literally do a podcast every single week saying they're a disgrace, because that's the only time they've won a game this season when we called them out. So unless you want to do that, Steve, and keep them up in the league, I think they're pretty much gone. So in answer to Sturman's question, Steve, let's just talk about Bryn, HamKam and Godset first.
Yeah.
What's your analysis before we wrap this show up? What's your analysis on all 3 teams? Bryn obviously newly promoted. The Farmers giving, crates of eggs to the man of the match and things like that. They are not really expected to survive, but they're doing a decent job of it, hanging in there. HamKam have been in this league for a few years now, of course, struggling. And then Godset, who are really having a bad season, aren't they?
Yeah, but I tell you what, Godset have momentum. It's that old dog again, that guy like Fadugba, who, if he keeps them up, I'm going to be banging on his door for an interview, because he's always someone I've wanted to pick the brains of, a proper old-fashioned coach. But I thought they were gone, to be honest, Godset. I think we all did, didn't we? But they've won their last 3 games. And in fact, 12 points, 13 points from their last 6. That's over 2 points per game average. Keep that up. They're going to be surviving in this league, because other teams are starting to fall like a stone. And what's happened at Godset, I think they did bring in a couple of good signings in the window. Conte and Baka have come in, but I think really what he's done for Gomo is he has galvanised the group. He's managed to get some of there's still quite a lot of good players at the club, experienced players like your defenders like Vilsvik, players like that, Stengel. I think he's got a tune out of them where it wasn't happening in the first half of the season. So at the minute, Godset look good. And they've got enough fixtures left to, probably survive now. and I'm expecting them to probably get out of trouble. Now, HamKam we knew was going to be a difficult year. We know it's. I think they've done really well to avoid trouble the last couple of seasons. And then Bryn are obviously now just starting to suffer from this promotion bubble, which has burst for some time. It reminds me a little bit of Yerv when they're in the league. It's been a while since Bryn have won, and I think at this point I agree with the comment on X there that I think they actually look the likely team probably to finish second bottom. I mean, forget playoffs here. I think 15th, which would maybe leave HamKam in the playoff spot for me. But it's really worrying for Bryn, especially HamKam as well. Just lacking a bit of firepower. But they have been there before and got themselves out of trouble, so maybe they can dig on that resolve.
Steve, it's funny because Bryn have the lowest possession statistics in the entire league, according to our partners, Fadugba Scout. Is there a correlation between possession and being a bad team? I mean, Bryn are actually second worst. Godset are third worst. Christiansen fourth worst. So, I've read some stats recently about Eliteseiren being one of the most fluid leagues in Europe in terms of open play passes, I think, per 90 minutes. I think that was the CIAS Observatory stats recently came out. When you look at sort of expected goals, we've done that, a few times in this podcast, just looking at other teams. Haugesund are the worst in the league by miles. HamKam second worst. Actually, Bryn and Godset aren't too bad. They'd survive if it came down to that in the league table. Christensen and Kayfum are third and fourth worst. But expected goals against is also, where they're kind of struggling really. Haugesund have got the worst XG against in the league by miles, 52.4 against. Godset then are in second bottom with that expected goals against. And Bryn are actually okay in that metric as well. They're kind of they're close to mid-table actually in that metric. And HamKam are fourth bottom, Steve. So how important is it to rack up the possession in these final few games? And you've said with respect to HamKam, maybe that they've sort of been fighting against the tide maybe a little bit. What do these teams need to change? Maybe is it a case of stylistic change? There's been a lot of managerial changes as well, as you just mentioned there with Godset. What's going to be the key factors in these last 8 games?
In answer to your general question, I don't think possession is everything in football. I mean, look at Nottingham Forest last season in the Premier League. I think they averaged the lowest possession, and they finished nearly in the Champions League. I think Brighton's record when they don't have the ball is brilliant. So it's not always about that. But that said, you do need some of the ball, don't you? And I think it has limited these sides. Look at Bryn's last home match against Tromsø. They only had 4 shots in the whole match. That's in 90 minutes of play. I think they had an XG of 0.02 until the 65th minute. I mean, and Tromsø are a good, decent side, but that's not good enough, is it? At home, that's when they're meant to be tough to beat and give it a good go. And I just think that, look, I don't want to criticise Bryn because I've predicted them rock bottom at the start of the season. They are very limited what they can do with the squad, with the resources. And it just feels to me like, 1 win since round 9. That's relegation form. They've ground a 1-1 draw at Fredrikstad at the weekend, and they're fighting really hard. I just think a lack of quality probably will be an issue there. And maybe HamKam, it's one of those, if you look at the team struggling down there, it's generally lack of a threat, isn't it? Haugesund, terrible XG. HamKam, terrible XG. Christiansen, terrible XG. Bryn, 5th worst. Kayfum are a bit of a unique case because of their brilliant defence. They're just lacking goals. And that's where Godset, I think, have got the edge on these teams quite a lot now. They've got a threat in their team. And I know Godset's underlying metrics defensively are terrible. They're a lot better under Fadugba. So that's where I think Godset, I'll be quite confident now as a Godset fan that they'll get out of trouble. It's just the other teams. In fact, if I'm looking even at Obosl again, I'd be fancying a crack at the playoff team this season, if it was HamKam or Bryn. I mean, Lillestrøm are miles clear of that league. The rest of them, it could be anyone. So it's one of them years where the bottom end of the Eliteseiren has been pretty crap, really, Jonathan, sadly. Let's see how it goes.
let's see how it goes indeed. And yeah, just sort of looking at some of the the most recent game of HamCam, actually, Tromsø away, a winning goal from Yeltsin Kamois. I don't know if he's named after Boris, but yeah, Tromsø got a few exciting players, Steve. I think, at a certain point, we may need a discussion about them. I know, obviously, we have had a talk about them. A couple of fans have obviously messaged in. Hyoto Dahl, I think, is one who's got a lot of interest, hasn't he? He's been quite exciting in Tromsø. Obviously, this Nelson Kamoas as well, but they got a player, actually. I think it's someone people won't talk about too much about Tromsø in this episode, even though they are top 4. But I just wanted to say they've signed a lad from Vesterås who we featured their manager, didn't we, back in the last season. They've obviously got Lars Olden Larsen as well, who was at Häcken for a long time, wasn't he? But maybe they're targeting the Swedish market because they've got Leo Kornic. But I just want to mention it quickly. A Thai Swedish heritage lad, Alexander Varneryd, who's a right back, who I actually thought was fantastic last season in Allsvenskan. And he's obviously got his move now to Tromsø. I think that's a new signing. In fact, I think he's only played, according to what I can see, 5 games for the club. I think there's a tidy signing there. So I'm interested to see how he gets on. And Tromsø seem to be tapping that Swedish market, and that does interest me a little bit. So
I think they get 4th. I do. I think that I like their fixtures. I said at the start, their fixtures look good. And that match at home to Vikings, a really big game. I would fully expect them now to stay in the top 4 with the fixtures they have. It's just a question. They could even get 3rd, In fact, they probably should. If Brann drop points like I expect them to with Europa League going on, Tromsø may well do that. And they just had a wobble mid-season. At the moment, the last few games, they don't look like conceding a goal, Jonathan. Like, no one's laying a glove on them. So they're in a good rhythm again, Tromsø.
Yeah, I think they're worth keeping an eye on, in fairness. I think they could, like you said, I think they've had a good season. They've got some quite good players. Alexander Varney, just keep an eye on him for any listeners who might want to know about a talent, because I think he's a decent player, and he's quite young as well. He's only 20 years old, so just turned 20, in fact. So I think
they have to, with Bodø Glimt doing what they're doing, Tromsø have to keep up. The sheer ambition, motivation. If you saw your biggest rival in whatever sport or player doing really well, you have to try and keep up. It's like it's sheer. They can't accept just being like mid-table in battling relegation every year. They got to be up there. And I think there's serious, that is driving Tromsø. The fans, that is driving them. And I don't think they'll rest until they win something, actually. It really is incredible to see the 2 teams up there in the Arctic Circle, in the top 4. It's an interesting one to watch out for. It really is.
Jim Ratcliffe, if you're listening, you can't just sit there and watch your biggest rivals win things. And we'll leave it there for this week's show. That arousing cry from Steve Ineos at Ineos. Steve, that'll do for this week. Obviously, we've had quite a long episode because we didn't have one last week. So thanks to everyone for listening. We've covered the Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. If you've made it all the way through, really appreciate your support. If you do want to contribute financially to this podcast and its production, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. And of course, you can follow us on the YouTube channel, on X, Twitter, at Nordic Foot Pod, or wherever you get your podcasts. We had a lot of comments from Spotify lately. Steve, I'm a big fan of these Spotify comments. I'm quite enjoying some of them.
Yeah.
So, next time I might read a few of them out. I might not do it now, but you can even leave comments on Spotify now is the bottom line. So if you do that, we do actually get some of them. So we will read some of them out as and when. But Steve, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to say again, thanks to partners Wyscout. Do check out that physical metrics article which we produced recently. An interesting addition to Wyscout on there that they've got with those metrics. But thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Nordic Football Podcast. Lots going on. Exciting times. Take care. As I say, until next time. Goodbye.
I'll leave you with the words of Neil J. Dawson on Spotify. Brilliant podcast. Both hosts have deep knowledge of the leagues and clearly love what they do. I'm here for the Allsvenskan in Europe, but I like to learn about Eliteseiren. Neil, your check is in the post. Thanks for listening. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.